Picture a school with 1,200 students. Statistically, about 12 psychopaths are wandering those halls. Sounds like the start of a thriller, right? Yet this is everyday reality. Roughly 1% of people meet the criteria for psychopathy. The word psychopath conjures images of movie villains and serial killers. But in reality, a psychopath isn't necessarily that cleaver-wielding maniac from a horror flick. A psychopath could just as easily be your neatly dressed colleague or that slick salesperson who charms you without breaking a sweat. Alright, it's the moment of truth, the psychopath test. We're about to speed run through all 20 traits from the official Hare Psychopathy checklist. Yes, the real deal used by professionals. Here's how this interactive test works. For each of the 20 traits I mentioned, give yourself 0 points if it doesn't apply to you, 1 point if it somewhat applies, and 2 points if it strongly applies. Keep track of your score as we go. Mental notes, notes app, carve it into your desk, and whatever works. And no cheating. By the end, you'll tally up your points and see where you land on the psychopath spectrum. Ready? Let's dive in. 1. Superficial charm, glibness. Are you a smooth talker with a killer smile, figuratively speaking, that you turn on whenever it suits you? This trait is all about being charming on the surface. Like you could sweet talk a waiter into giving you free dessert, even if deep down you couldn't care less. Score yourself. 0 points if you're about as charming as an awkward turtle. 1 point if you can turn on the charm now and then, like faking a laugh at your boss's bad jokes. 2 points if you know you can reel people in with flattering words and a grin, even when you don't mean a word of it. Second, grandiose sense of self-worth. Be honest, do you secretly think you're the main character in everyone's story? This trait is basically an oversized ego, feeling like you're smarter, hotter, and more important than everyone else in the room. Think you'd name a planet after yourself if you could. If you're humble pie incarnate, give yourself 0. If you occasionally catch yourself daydreaming about your future autobiography because you're kind of a big deal, that's 1. If you're convinced the world would stop spinning without you, yep, that's a 2. 3. Need for stimulation, proneness to boredom. Do you get restless easily and constantly seek thrills? This trait is about hating routines and craving excitement. Maybe you're the type who can't sit through a dull class or shift without fidgeting, or you're always saying YOLO and chasing the next adrenaline rush. Score 0 if you're totally fine with calm, quiet Netflix and chill weekends. Score 1 if you do get bored sometimes and find yourself scrolling TikTok in class just to feel alive. Score 2 if your motto is basically, keep it exciting or I'm out. Like you've contemplated skydiving while bungee jumping because one extreme sport at a time isn't enough. 4. Pathological lying. This one's straightforward. Do you lie as easily as you breathe? We're not talking the occasional I'm 5 minutes away text when you haven't left home. We mean chronic, habitual lying about anything and everything. Psychopaths often lie just for the fun of it or to get their way without batting an eye. Give yourself 0 points if you're generally honest to a fault. You couldn't lie convincingly to save your life. Mark 1. If you fib on small things once in a while, like faking sick days when you're perfectly fine. But if you're thinking, I lie all the time and people believe me, that's a solid 2. And maybe you've even started believing your own lies. Yikes. 5. Conning, manipulativeness. Do you enjoy manipulating people like pawns on a chessboard? This trait is about being sneakily controlling, tricking others to get what you want. Maybe you've convinced a friend to do your homework with some sob story, or you're a master of guilt-tripping your parents into extending curfew. Score 0 if manipulating others really isn't your style. You're more of a live and let live person. Score 1 if you occasionally find yourself scheming a little. Perhaps you can butter people up or twist a situation to your advantage now and then. But score 2 if you're thinking, I do that daily. If you treat life like one big con game and you're always the winner, give yourself 2 and maybe a sly wink. 6. Lack of remorse or guilt. When you mess up or hurt someone, do you feel bad afterward? Psychopaths notoriously don't. This trait is all about having 0 guilt. For example, you cut in line, make a kid cry, and sleep like a baby that night. No regrets. 0 points if you're empathetic and apologize when you've done wrong. You feel genuinely awful even if you accidentally stepped on someone's toe. 1 point if you occasionally do something selfish and just shrug it off. Hey, nobody's perfect, but at least sometimes you feel a twinge of guilt later. 2 points if you basically never say sorry, because you rarely, if ever, feel sorry. If remorse is an emotion you just don't experience, you're thinking my conscience is clear because I don't have one. That's a big 2. 7. Shallow affect. Limited emotional range. Do you sometimes wonder if you're missing the emotional chip? Shallow affect means your emotional reactions are, well, shallow. Psychopaths might appear cold because they don't really feel intense emotions deeply. Ever been told you're like a robot or that you have a poker face at a funeral? 0 points if you're an emotional open book. You cried at that one coffee commercial and you feel all the feelings. 1 point if you have emotions but maybe you keep them on a low simmer. You feel things but people might not always notice. 2 points if you're basically unfazed by things that upset most people. Your favorite pet goldfish died and you were like, oh, what's for dinner? If you're nodding and not feeling any particular way about it, score 2. 8. Callousness, lack of empathy. Empathy equals feeling what others feel. Callous lack of empathy equals you couldn't care less about others' feelings. This trait is the hallmark of psychopaths. They just don't care if you're hurt, sad, or in pain. Ask yourself, when a friend is crying on your shoulder, are you internally checking your watch and thinking about what's for lunch? 0 points if you're the group's therapist, always caring and compassionate. You tear up when your friend is sad. 1 point if you do care about some people, but you might have a bit of a hard shell. You're not Mother Teresa, but you're not a monster either. 2 points if you really struggle to feel for others. Like you have to play pretend to seem concerned. If someone tells you their sob story and your honest reaction is "so what?" that's a 2. 9. Parasitic lifestyle. This sounds gross, but it basically means living off others like a parasite. Do you deliberately mooch off people? Psychopathic types often take advantage of others' generosity and give nothing back. Think of someone who crashes on couches, borrows money and never returns it, and generally leeches off friends or family. Score 0 if you're as independent as it gets. You insist on paying your share and cringe at the idea of freeloading. Score 1 if, okay, maybe you freeloaded once or twice. Hey, moving back in with parents for a bit or sponging off a friend's Netflix account. Minor stuff. Score 2 if you're practically a professional moocher. Your motto is, why work when others can work for me? If you've ever thought of your loved ones as walking ATMs or personal chefs, give yourself a 2 and maybe buy them a thank you card someday, huh? 10. Poor behavioral controls. This trait is about anger and impulse control, or rather, the lack thereof. Do you have a short fuse? Find yourself throwing tantrums, punching walls, screaming at drivers in traffic. Psychopaths often struggle to control their tempers and impulses, leading to explosive outbursts over little things. 0 points if you're calm and collected, even when provoked. Your zen could rival a Buddhist monk's. 1 point if you sometimes lose your cool. Maybe you've yelled at your computer when it froze, or occasionally snap at people when stressed, but you regret it after. 2 points if anger management issues should be your middle name. You frequently fly off the handle at minor annoyances, and it ain't pretty. If you've ever been described as having no chill whatsoever, that's a 2. Halfway through. If you've already racked up a high score by now, well, no turning back. Keep going to see where you land. 11th, promiscuous sexual behavior. Time to get personal. Do you have a very active and casual sex life? We're talking lots of partners, one-night stands, relationships purely for physical fun, and a general pattern of avoiding commitment. Psychopaths are known for being sexually promiscuous. Charming people into bed is on brand for them. Score 0 if you're pretty reserved or strictly monogamous. No judgment either way. This is about patterns, not morality. Score 1 if you've had the occasional fling or it's complicated scenario, but nothing too wild. Score 2 if your dating history is basically a long list of short steamy encounters. If you're chuckling thinking, heh, I've got more X's than X-Men, that might be a 2. And please practice safe sex, you wild thing. 12th, early behavior problems. Cast your mind back to childhood and adolescence. Were you the nightmare kid? This trait covers serious behavior issues before age 12. Think constant fights, lying, cheating, vandalism, bullying, maybe setting a trash can on fire just for kicks. 0 points if you were a little angel, or just a normal kid with the usual minor shenanigans. 1 point if you had some issues growing up, maybe a suspension here or there, occasional detentions for bad behavior, but you straightened out eventually. 2 points if your childhood rap sheet is long, frequent trouble at school, youth encounters with law enforcement, everyone in the principal's office knew you by first name. If you're reminiscing about how you spent more time grounded or in juvie than at summer camp, give yourself a 2. 13. Lack of realistic long-term goals. Do you drift through life without a plan or set outrageous unrealistic goals? Psychopaths often live in the moment without realistic future planning. It's like the student who says, I'll become a billionaire by next year, but has no actionable plan, or someone who just never thinks about the future at all. 0 points if you're the type who has a 5-year plan, a retirement account, and a color-coded life roadmap. Basically, you could teach a class on goal setting. 1 point if you have some goals, but they might be a tad wishy-washy, or you're prone to procrastinating on them. You kind of sort of know what you want to do eventually. 2 points if your only plan is no plan. If you're just winging it through life entirely or constantly chasing pipe dreams with no follow-through, I'll become an astronaut rock star president. That's a 2. 14th, impulsivity. Do you act first and think later? This trait is all about being impulsive, spur-of-the-moment decisions without considering the consequences. For example, you see something expensive, you buy it immediately. Who needs rent money, right? Or you blurt out whatever's on your mind and instantly regret it. 0 points if you're a careful planner who weighs pros and cons before doing anything. Impulse control of a saint. 1 point if you occasionally slip. Maybe you have a mild online shopping habit, or you've made some spontaneous choices you later second-guessed, but generally you try to be responsible. 2 points if your friends describe you as chaotic in the nicest way. You're always acting on a whim. If you've ever gotten a tattoo at 3 a.m. just because, or adopted a puppy on a random Tuesday with no plan, that impulsivity score might be a 2. And hey, at least you're not boring. 15. Irresponsibility. Can people rely on you, or do you flake out on obligations left and right? Psychopathic individuals often neglect their duties. They don't pay bills on time, don't honor commitments, and generally shrug off responsibility. 0 points if you're responsible to a T. You show up on time, do what you promise, feed your goldfish daily, and return library books before the due date. 1 point if you try to be responsible, but hey, sometimes life happens. You've missed a few deadlines, or forgot your best friend's birthday once or twice, but you mostly make things right. 2 points if oops, I forgot, or I just didn't feel like it is your go-to excuse. If your plants are dying, your assignments are always late, and your room looks like a tornado hit it because you just can't be bothered, that's a 2 for irresponsibility. 16. Failure to accept responsibility for own actions. When things go wrong, do you own up, or do you always blame someone or something else? Psychopaths are champions of not taking blame. They'll find any excuse or scapegoat to avoid admitting fault. 0 points if you're accountable. You say my bad when it really is your bad, and you take the consequences on the chin. 1 point if occasionally you'll toss out a little excuse. We all have that instinct to save face, but you know deep down when something was your fault. 2 points if your knee-jerk reaction is denial and blame shifting every time. Failed a test. The teacher hates you. Got a speeding ticket. The cop was targeting you unfairly. If nothing is ever your fault in your mind, give yourself a 2 and maybe a mirror to reflect on. 17. Many short-term relationships. This one's about your relationship history. The official term is many short-term marital relationships. But hey, not many 18-year-olds have multiple ex-spouses, so let's broaden it. Do you constantly jump from relationship to relationship? Psychopaths often can't maintain long, stable relationships. They may charm someone and then bail when boredom strikes. 0 points if you tend to have longer-term relationships, or you're happily single and not into serial dating. 1 point if you've had a few relationships that didn't last super long, but at least a couple have been more than just flings. You've got some track record of stability, even if it's still a work in progress. 2 points if you're a serial dater or heartbreaker. If your friends have stopped trying to remember your partner's names because you've introduced like 6 bays of the month this year, that's a 2. And if you have managed to marry and divorce multiple people by 25, wow, also a 2, and maybe slow down. 18. Juvenile delinquency. Did you have any criminal run-ins as a teenager? This trait covers actual law-breaking youth behavior up to age 17. Think arrests, court appearances, juvie hall, the big stuff, not just a detention for smoking behind the school. 0 points if, aside from maybe a speeding ticket or 2, your record is squeaky clean in your teen years. No real crimes, you kept it legal. 1 point if there were 1 or 2 minor brushes with the law. Perhaps you got caught shoplifting once, or you and your buddies did something dumb that earned you community service, but nothing chronic. 2 points if you basically had a mini criminal career before you turned 18. If phrases like juvenile court or probation bring back memories, and you were that kid parents warned their kids to avoid, give yourself a 2. 19th, revocation of conditional release. This is a fancy way of asking, have you ever been let out of jail or given probation only to mess it up and get thrown back in? In other words, you had a second chance and blew it by reoffending. For the younger folks who haven't exactly been to prison, you can imagine a similar concept. Say you were grounded but snuck out again. Same idea, rule broken again. 0 points if this is totally NA. You've never been in that situation, which is good. It means no parole or probation issues for you. 1 point if it's kind of applicable. Maybe you had some conditional situation, legal, or even personal promises that you violated once, but it's not a pattern. 2 points if yes, guilty as charged. You've had probation revoked, got sent back to juvie or jail, or in general, you just couldn't stay on the straight and narrow even when authorities gave you a chance. If you're nodding along here, perhaps from inside a correctional facility, that's a 2. And then the last but not least, criminal versatility. Are you an all-around lawbreaker? Criminal versatility means having a variety in your criminal repertoire, not just being a one-trick pony. A psychopath might dabble in everything: fraud, theft, assault, you name it. Essentially many different types of crimes over time. 0 points if you've basically never broken the law, or maybe a trivial one or 2. You rebel. 1 point if your misdeeds have been pretty limited to one area. For instance, only petty theft in your teens, but you weren't into other crimes. 2 points if you could write a memoir titled Crime Buffet. Try everything. If your rap sheet looks like a menu of illicit activities and you've been multidisciplinary in your rule breaking, not that we endorse that, mark a 2. Time to tally up your score. Go ahead, add up the points from all 20 items. We'll wait. Got your total? 40 would be a perfect score, as in a perfectly terrible score, since 40 means you checked every psychopath box. And remember, in the US, scoring 30 or above on this test officially lands you in psychopath territory. Now let's see what your number might mean. 0 to 10 points. Normal human being. Congrats, you're basically not a psychopath at all. At least by this quiz's standards. You likely have a healthy conscience and empathy. Maybe even an overactive guilt complex. Put that halo down, Angel. In other words, you passed the psychopath test with flying colors. Go celebrate with some ice cream, or, continue living your stable, non-homicidal life. And if you scored a 0, are you even human? Kidding. That just means you're exceedingly well-adjusted, or you were very modest in your self-scoring. 11 to 20 points. Some red flags, but not a psychopath. You're mostly normal, but a few of those traits raised an eyebrow. Maybe you're a bit impulsive or occasionally manipulative. Nothing too crazy, just little red flags here and there. Think of it like you have a dash of hot sauce in your personality mix, but you're not full-on diabolical. Overall, you're probably just a somewhat edgy or flawed human. Join the club. Our advice: keep an eye on those spicier traits so they don't get spicier. But hey, at least now you have an excuse for the next time someone calls you out. It's okay. I scored like 15 on the psychopath test. I'm totally fine. Actually, and maybe don't use that line in public. 21 to 29 points. You're skating on thin ice. Whoa there, you scored pretty high. While you haven't hit the psychopath cutoff, you're uncomfortably close. You're skating on thin ice and hearing it crack. You might have quite a few psychopathic tendencies that could freak people out just a tad. Perhaps you're impulsive, aggressive, non-empathetic, not full psychopath, but let's just say you might star as the villain in some people's life stories. The good news, you're self-aware now. Hopefully, maybe rein things in before you hit the big 3-0. Consider this a friendly heads up to chill out a little. After all, thin ice only holds for so long before, well, you get the idea. 30 plus points. Officially a psychopath. Cue the dramatic music. If your total is 30 or above, then according to the hair checklist, you qualify as a psychopath in clinical terms, at least in the US. In plain English, you checked a lot of the boxes. That's the bad news. The good news? You're really good at maxing out a test score? All jokes aside, scoring this high means you exhibit many psychopathic traits. If this were an actual clinical assessment, you'd likely be flagged for further evaluation. But since this is just a YouTube video, we're not going to haul you off to an institution or anything. Interpretation, you might want to do some soul searching, maybe talk to a professional, or at least use your powers for good instead of evil. And definitely don't brag about this at parties. Hey, I got 32 on the psychopath test is not the flex you think it is. So are you a psychopath? If you scored low, you can breathe easy. You're just your average empathetic human. If you scored high, well, at least you know. But here's a comforting thought. If you're actually concerned about your results, that's a pretty strong sign you're probably not a true psychopath. Real psychopaths aren't exactly known for worrying about whether they're psychopaths. In fact, the very act of soul searching or feeling uneasy about a high score suggests you have a conscience in there, something a classic psychopath lacks. And with that said, thanks for sticking through this little self-assessment with me. Hopefully you had some fun and learned something about yourself, or at least got to laugh at how crazy some of these traits are. Remember, this checklist is a tool to understand extreme traits. It's not destiny. If you enjoyed the ride, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop your final score down in the comments. I read every single one, and I'm definitely side-eyeing the 30+ crowd. Share this test with a friend, especially that one buddy who's just a little too charming. Wink, wink. Until next time, stay safe, stay self-aware, and don't psychopath too hard. Good luck out there.